So let's examine some strong physical evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ found in the Shroud of Turin. What is the Shroud of Turin? Well, the shroud is the burial cloth of Jesus. It's written about in the Gospels. In Matthew, we see that Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen shroud, and laid it in its own new tomb. In the Gospel of John, both Peter and the disciple John run towards the empty tomb. John arrives first, and it says, he went down and saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. When Simon Peter caught up with him, he entered the tomb. And then Peter saw the linen cloths lying there, and also the cloth that had covered his head, not lying with the burial cloths, but rolled up in a separate place. So it's referenced in the earliest documentation of the burial of Jesus Christ. Now, the Catholic Church has held the Shroud of Turin since that time, and people have come and venerated, prayed in front of it because it's been so sacred of a relic. Um, but it hasn't really had much detail or information in it until Secondo Pia, the amateur photographer, photographed the Shroud of Turin in 1898. And in the negatives, you see this extremely detailed body in the shroud. Now, as our science and physics have evolved, we've tested this relic hundreds of times in hundreds of different labs around the world. And we have some extremely powerful data that is worth contemplation. So the image that is formed in this two-dimensional linen, non-photographic surface has the properties of a photographic negative as well as an X-ray photograph, as well as a hologram. It's three-dimensional. The most common scientific conclusion about this image is that it was formed somehow from radiation. Radiation so intense that it is believed to be some form of ultraviolet light without heat energy, but light energy in bursts of 1/40 billionth of a second up to billions of watts of energy. We do not have the capability, we do not even have enough laser technology or electrical power on Earth to reproduce this image, but yet this dead body somehow was able to do it. So it definitely seems like it is the moment of the resurrection captured in the burial cloth. Here's a few video clips that give a little bit more information to hopefully inspire further investigation.
Thank you in advance. The first reason is related to a March 2019 study where a replica of the Shroud of Turin was attempted. The results stated that the perfect reproduction of the Turin Shroud remains a challenge since many other characteristics of the original image have not yet been obtained with any of the processes used for reproduction to date. That basically means that even with the most sophisticated technology available today, we cannot replicate the Shroud of Turin. It's hard for me to believe that in the year 2020, we cannot replicate a centuries-old cloth. A similar experiment was conducted in 2012, and from that experiment, we saw the amount of watts necessary to create an image with just some of the properties. It would look something like this. That was the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. With every light on, 750 megawatts are used. Dr. Paolo Di Lazzaro, who led the 2012 study, told National Geographic that it would take several billion watts to create the image. Another thing to factor in is that 750 megawatts are being used throughout the stadium. What science is telling us is that a dead body would have to exude billions of watts to create the image on the shroud. No mere human could do that. But Jesus, the God-man, could. As he illuminated during the transfiguration, he surely illuminated in an even greater way during his resurrection, which is recorded on the Shroud of Turin for us. Also, it would take 10,000 of these lasers to create the image on the shroud, which exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet light sources available today. That statement says it all. We don't have the capability to replicate the shroud. So every Easter, when we remember the resurrection, think about the power of Jesus. Think about that literally explosive power as he rose from the dead to create this image. It's amazing. Now you might be wondering, why can't we replicate all the characteristics of the shroud? This is due to the cloth containing a three-dimensional image, which is the second reason I believe this is the burial cloth of Jesus. Fabrics are not supposed to contain precise 3D images. As you can see here, a three-dimensional image can be taken from this two-dimensional cloth. This three-dimensional nature inspired the Shroud of Turin research project, also known as STURP, which was the most thorough analysis of the shroud to date. The 33-person team was comprised of experts in various fields who spent 17 months preparing for the analysis. They did incredible work, and here they tested several types of images and were not able to obtain the three-dimensional style that the shroud had. To date, this three-dimensional nature could not be matched. The data from the study actually allowed the face of Christ to be modeled by the History Channel, which you'll see here.
Physical investigation of the shroud began in 1969, and in 1978, for 5 days only, a US-led team of researchers known as STURP, or Shroud of Turin Research Project, were granted unprecedented, round-the-clock access to the shroud. These researchers, who were 33 in number, extensively tested and examined the cloth, working 24-hour-a-day shifts and using 7 tons of equipment. Their test concluded, positively, that the cloth had no artificial pigments contained within it, and went on to say that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist, thereby eliminating any doubts that the cloth had been a painting. The scientists then tested the bloodstains and confirmed that they were composed of hemoglobin and tested positive for serum albumin, both of which are proteins found in human blood. Now, what seriously confused the researchers was that, in their own words, no combination of physical, chemical, biological, or medical circumstances could account for this image, meaning that, despite the presence of human blood, there is absolutely no way a human body could leave an imprint such as that of the Shroud of Turin on a cloth. If this is true, then how in the world was this image created? Since at least the 1930s, scientists have argued that the only way the image could have formed on the cloth is through exposure to radiation. The Russian scientist Alexander Belyakov suggested that the image could have formed through intense but short-lasting exposure to light. Others have argued X radiation or ultraviolet rays could account for the image's creation. Whatever the source of radiation might have been, researchers unanimously agree that the radiant source was vertical, meaning that the light had to have come from above the cloth. Italian researcher Paolo Di Lazzara stated that the radiation, which he believes to have been ultraviolet, exceeds the maximum power released by all ultraviolet sources of light available today. He also goes on to say that it would require pulses having duration shorter than 1/40 billionth of a second, and that the intensities would have to be on the order of several billion watts.
But this isn't the most amazing aspect of the Shroud image. The International Institute for Advanced Studies of Space Representation scientists in Paloma, Italy, have presented research that the body of the man was in motion when the image was produced. Yes, you heard me right. The body appears to have been moving. Now we know that because the image isn't a single exposure, but a combination of multiple exposures, sort of the way a strobe light photography can follow the path of a tennis ball or a golf swing. The image on the shroud shows various objects in motion, like the nails in the man's wrist and feet, the teflon on his arm, and his belt buckle moving up and down with his breath. The Italian Institute's research shows that multiple exposures of these very easy to track items on the body of the man are present in different positions, showing that his hands and feet and his chest, when he breathed, were moving. Current theory is that the light that produced the image was oscillating, producing light in bursts, just like a strobe light would. This accounts for the multiple exposures, one with each burst of light, which in turn accounts for why certain areas of the shroud image are somewhat fuzzy. Movement would make those areas seem out of focus. Now, how could the body of a dead man be moving in the image? This was obviously a burial shroud. The eyes of the man are closed and covered with coins or buttons. So if this is Jesus and he is moving, it is the exact moment of the resurrection prior to him opening his eyes. Can you see why God might want to keep evidence such as that to share with the world?
There's so much information in this shroud that in the year 2024 we have exhibitions traveling the world. This is a three-dimensional bronze sculpture that was created by the information strictly found in this shroud. There's a show right now. It started off in Spain. It's going to be touring the world. There is a hyper realistic rendition of the man in the shroud based on all the detailed information that is held in there. It's called The Man in the Shroud of Turin. And they refer to this person as the mystery man, even though if you look at the exhibit itself, it's a story of Jesus Christ and Jesus of Nazareth. And so it is interesting why they will not call it Jesus. I guess, you know, that makes sense in these times, but I think it's pretty obvious who this man is. And that this very much shows strong evidence that the moment of his resurrection is captured in the Shroud of Turin. What else is really interesting? If you have any questions, I would love to discuss them. But this information is only available in the 21st century, really. I mean, 20th century it came to light, but right now we've tested it so many times that I mean the consensus is the consensus. Now it's just a matter of how did this happen? And so if this is legitimately showing the resurrection of Jesus Christ, there is nothing more important to contemplate in our life. The implication it has for us and our eternal destiny and what we are and who we are and what our purpose is immense, is it's inexplicable. It's just beyond profound. So please check it out. See if there's any ways that you find that the science is faulty or what you think the loopholes are. Or any skepticism is extremely welcome because that is what led me to this moment in time.